CrossFit Games athlete Danielle Brandon, who is about to have a documentary come out about her and her life. DB, this is pretty big. What even started the conversation of diving into your life and really your story?
Ooh, okay. So I think when I first met Ben with R.A.D, owner of R.A.D, when I first met him, he kind of asked me like why I do this, kind of like where I see myself in the future, some goals. And I had always said like it was for the kids because of how I grew up and how taken care of I was by people in my life, going through what I was going through. And so I was kind of like, man, like I want to inspire kids and especially inspire kids like me or kids who feel like they don't really like see a future.
Mm.
Um, so kind of that, like, and I think finally now it was time to just kind of tell my story, I guess. So
Why do you think now? Like, I'm curious how long the idea of this was kind of starting to accumulate in your mind, and if the timing was right now, or just the relationship to have Rad help you tell the story was right now, or what that was like for you.
I mean, I think like all of those things do go together, like the timing of having the help to do something like this. But also, it was never really like big on my agenda to share like this side of me or this side of my story because I think if you ask anybody, like I've never wanted to identify with this
Mm.
in a sense that it does make me who I am today. And it's like, of course, it's been like quite the journey and affected my journey because of how I was raised, just like everybody. But I never wanted it to be like this, oh, poor DB, or like,
Mm.
I didn't want it to be this thing that was like always attached with me. Like anything that I did, like, oh, but she did this, or like, oh, like this is where she came from. Just like so personal. Like when I see other people do that with like their story and like, how they were raised or anything, right? Like any triumph or a really hard thing that people have gone through, when they attach it to themselves, like I'm always like, man, like that's amazing. Like I'm never like, ugh, like why would you do it that way? It's just how I personally felt like I would rather go about it. Just because like I wanted to get somewhere and for it to be just like all about who I am now and like not about who I was or what I
Mm.
came from.
Do you feel like you've been able to kind of compartmentalize your life into who you were and who you are now? Or like as you get older and as you've come out with this doc and told your story, that you see how much that the version of you growing up kind of still lives with the version of you now?
Oof, yeah. I mean, totally right. Like that is, it's funny. Actually, during the doc, I haven't talked about this much about it. Not, I mean, with my closest friends a little bit, but I've never really like had somebody kind of like question me and like, really like ask like the nitty gritty. And during this doc, I think almost immediately we kind of started getting into like these really like, really like emotional and like really deep questions that I'd never answered before. And I was like, holy shit, like this is what therapy's for. I'm like, this is why I should have been going to therapy like a long time ago. And so, and I think shortly after that, like I do go to therapy now, but it totally like it is with me, and I think it can explain or help me see myself a little bit better and understand myself better, and I think also help other people understand me. Um, but also, I think a lot of times people can use it as like an excuse, right? Like
Mhm.
people can use like these really hard things that happen to them as an excuse, and I've never I've never wanted to do that. And like I totally have, right? I've been like, well, especially like, in some relationships, it's like, well, like, this is how I was raised, like
Mhm.
but it definitely does like create a better understanding for who I am and for everybody. Like wherever you come from, you're like, oh, like this makes a little more sense, and you don't have to be so hard on yourselves, and hopefully people who can understand aren't as hard on me, you know?
Well, and something that I've really always admired about you since you've come into the CrossFit space and you're one of the top athletes that we talk about is you are so authentic. You beat to your own drum. Whether people love you or hate you, nobody can criticize you for just being who you are. But then you watch this documentary of you and like you said, it goes into the nitty gritty of your life and your upbringing. And was there any hesitation of showing this CrossFit community, maybe even larger than this CrossFit community, some of the deepest parts of yourself?
Totally. I mean, I'm not one to just kind of like blab about myself or, like be super personal and deep always, even with my closest friends and in my relationships. So to share it with people who I've never met, people who have no idea about me, or people who have just this idea about me because of social media and because of CrossFit, um, it's definitely like kind of tough because there's always that opening that door for judgment.
Mhm.
Um, but like ultimately, again, like as I've been my whole life, like you're either with me or not. And, I think this can show people just another side, and they're either for me or not. And, they either can be understanding of it or not. And that's just kind of it stays so true and true no matter what I share, or the depth of what I share too.
Mhm. Without giving away too much, because we obviously want people to go watch the doc, and I don't wanna give any spoilers, but looking at the characters who came and were part of the doc, you have your manager, Cooper, you have, your mother, you have your brother, some of your friends from your hometown growing up, even Justin Kotler when you were working with underdogs. Were you part of those conversations, kind of vetting who you thought would be able to tell a really authentic, transparent version of you? Or what were those conversations like, especially knowing that some of those conversations are going to be controversial and there are going to be two sides of the stories?
Yeah, I think what's really nice about this documentary is I did have a lot of input. And like we did literally go through a very like rough timeline of my life, and so that was like pretty difficult, like trying to come up with this timeline of like, okay, these people were here, when I was in middle school, elementary, like it was like this rough draft of trying to draft these people basically of like who could give really good insight, to what was going on, their perspective. But I did have a lot of say in that, which was nice. But then ultimately, it was in Tone's hands to be like, okay, like I think, you know, they went with the people they went with for a purpose and for a reason.
One thing that I'm curious about, and go into as much or as little as you want, but what is your relationship now with your mother and your brother?
Oh, yeah. So it's obviously when you watch the doc, and you'll see that it's been quite the journey of a relationship with my mom. And I mean, I try to talk to her as much as possible now. I think she calls me just about every day. And I made the mistake of telling her to always call me twice because my phone's on Do Not Disturb. So
Oh, yeah.
even if the phone's not on Do Not Disturb, she'll always, without a doubt, call twice. Um, so if that says anything, I try to talk to her. And it's honestly been really surprising and quite cool to see, just like the value in a relationship with your mom.
Mm,
Like I've gone through some like pretty rough things, as just like even in CrossFit, right? And like moving and like the Vegas thing. And it's like this natural instinct in people to just want to call their mom.
mhm.
And so I think that's kind of like what started the mend of our relationship, was just me going through shit and wanting to call my mom about it. And like, and it's been like that since, we first kind of re-met in college. And I would periodically kind of call her and be like on the phone crying, so that kind of started the mend of our relationship. And I think just without even me knowing it, like she was just always there for me during those times, right? And without even knowing it, I just started calling her more and more, even if it's just to chat. So
Mm.
yeah. And my brother, he's like does his own thing. He's kind of hard to catch, just like I am. And we try to talk as much as possible, as much as I can catch him. I think he's tougher to get a hold of than me.
Which is
So,
surprising because sometimes you're not the easiest to track down, DB.
no, I know it. I know.
You bring up Vegas, and when I was watching the promotional teases, that was something that really caught my eye, is that Justin Kotler was in it.
Yeah.
Because we look at that time when you moved to Vegas, you were training under Justin Kotler with underdogs, and then it was about a month before the games, you to the community abruptly left. Something happened, and it was what I would call kind of a controversy in the space, something that, people love to talk about drama and what's going on and speculate. And I think that if anything, it shows how big of a person both of you are to come on and speak about that. But was that something that you toyed with in your head, whether you wanted to go back down that storyline, whether you wanted it to be part of the piece? Because to the CrossFit community, it probably was like an essential piece of the story that
Right.
we didn't have answers to. But just for you as a big picture, it was such a small part of like the whole story when I watched the doc.
Yeah. I think, man, there's a lot there, but I
Mhm,
think to be like the most honest, it never felt controversial to like have that in there or to have Justin in there.
mhm,
I didn't really. I was told that Justin was going to be in it. Like I was told Justin was going to be interviewed, and I never was like, wait, like why? Like what are we doing? Right? I think it was just like, oh wow, like oh my gosh, like he's going to interview like that. Like oh my god, I can't believe like he's going to do that. Right? To your point of like the fact he even would interview for this just says so much.
mhm,
Um, and honestly, like there is just like still, I think a lot of pain on both sides for us, as you can see in the doc.
mhm,
So I think that's more the hardest part is like I think there still could be like a really tough conversation to be had there, because that situation, I think neither of us handled to the best of our ability. And so I think that's more than anything. But I'm really happy that he's in it. And it was like really tough for me to watch because that was like he was such a pivotal moment in my life and
mm.
such a major person in my life that that's the only thing that was hard to watch because it's just like emotional. But like there's no way I would not want him in it.
Mm.
He truly is like such a big part of my story and who I am. He supported me like no one ever has, I mean, like even with the new coaches I've had before, I've talked so much about like, okay, well, Kotler supported me this way. And like, I loved when he did this and that. And it's like, you just can't like teach or tell a coach how to be like
Yeah.
Kotler. Kotler is Kotler.
No.
Yeah, I'm like, "Oh, well, can you just, like, believe in me the way he believed in me?" Or, like and it's like, you can't, like, I've had
Yeah.
conversations with coaches, "Well, can you just, like, say this?" And then, like, they say it, and I'm like, "It's just not the same, like, you don't mean it like Kotler did."
When you think about your upbringing, all of the adversity, there's certainly not a lack of adversity that you've been through, but one of the things that kind of continued to push you forward has been sports. It's been athletics. It's, gymnastics, pole vaulting, now CrossFit. So many people that could have been dealt your hand of cards would not have found a positive outlet like that. They would have chose drugs, alcohol, crime. I mean, the list goes on and on. What do you think it was about sports in general that gave you something to hope for a better life and to actually be in control of your own path?
Yeah. I think with sports, it wasn't, I mean, it helped that I was like good, right? Like,
Yes, that helps.
like sometimes I think back and I'm like, man, like I'm just like, I feel so lucky to be truly, have excelled in so many sports. Like I feel really lucky because that is like another added layer that not everybody is fortunate to have, right? Like I was very fortunate that I and was good at these sports. I worked my ass off and I worked very hard. Um, but I am lucky in that sense. And I think because when you're at sport or you're at practice, especially gymnastics, or like these really intense sports where you're doing 2 a days as a kid, and with how gymnastics was, right? It's very intense with your coach. Like there's a
Yeah.
lot of rules. There's a lot to unpack there. There's a lot that goes on in gymnastics. And I think like when I was there, it's like that was just the only focus. Like, and even in sports, like there's no time to think about anything else. And it's crazy because also in sport, I don't know how to like explain this, but it's so like in the moment, and there's no like future thoughts or thinking about the past. It's like you're just so in it and in the moment. And I think that's just how I got to like living my life, was just like day by day, and like practice by practice, being at home, like just like one day at a time. So I think that just like carried me like to go to practice every day. And also like within sports, like there's truly amazing people. I mean, like I could not have done it with sport alone. It was the people within those like communities and like the coaches that speak in the documentary, like those people, I mean, they carried me through some really hard times and like they didn't even know it. And I think that is true for everyone. I mean, in high school and in middle school, I'm sure so many of us can remember this like one teacher or one coach that they just like felt so cared about. And like, you still look up to them, and you looked up to them so much, sometimes more than your parents, because you're spending so much more time at sports with your coaches,
Mhm.
more time than you are with your parents. So it was just, every day, like just focusing on that. And there's no time to focus on anything else. So just quite literally a really good distraction.
Do you ever get imposter syndrome that, "Oh my god, look at the life that I have created for myself, and look at all of these fantastic support systems I have, and a brand that you work with is creating a doc about you." Did you ever see your life taking a direction like this?
Yeah, I definitely probably get that almost every day. Like, I think every day I'll have big or small reminders in my life of like, holy shit, like I'm like so thankful. Like I'm living a really good life. And
Yeah.
I think especially like when I think about my brother, like, he doesn't get to live as good of a life as I do. And so that can make it really tough or create that like that feeling. And even just it's crazy, when you come from something like that, you almost think like, did I like, did I like you, it's like the blur of the work you did to get to this end spot or the spot you're in now.
Mhm.
Like it's so blurry. Like I'm like, did I do anything? Like it's
That's
crazy. It makes you question like, do I really work hard? Like, how did I get good at CrossFit? Am I just like
mm.
magically good at it? Like it's the
You,
weirdest
like,
thing.
black out those
Yeah.
the moments and, like, all of the building blocks that got you here almost?
Yeah. Like, sometimes I don't credit myself for the hard work that I do put in. Like
Mhm.
I do go to the gym and I work really hard. But sometimes with what you have and like the outcome can just kind of make all of that blurry of like, did I work hard? Did I do that? Like, I mean, it's wild. And I'm sure other people can relate to that.
Do you think people will treat you different after they watch this doc?
I don't, I would hope not. I don't think. I don't know. I just haven't really thought about that. I don't think.
And and when I ask that, I'm not necessarily thinking a negative or a positive
Yeah.
thing. I'm just wondering if, you know, people might feel more connected to you, or maybe if somebody was rude to you in the past, that this would give them a little bit more perspective into your life and why like certain things might make you tick a certain way. I just don't know if you ever have thought about that.
I think like if I try to put myself in seeing somebody that I looked up to and I was like, oh shit, like that's crazy. Didn't know any of that. I
Mm,
don't think I would treat them differently. I think I would definitely look at them a little bit differently, but I would
sure.
hope it would be with more of just an understanding or like a little bit of a different perspective of when they do something or when they speak about something, maybe more so where they're coming from. But I do hope it shuts some people up because I have seen some very like aggressive comments of like, oh, TV's just this privileged girl who grew up, blah, blah, blah. Like, like I've seen
When
those. So I
people talk out of turn with no perspective.
yeah, it's like, yeah, you know what? I do live a very good life and I'm not going to be like, poor me all the time. So maybe it does seem like I came from this great, amazing thing. Right.
Mm,
But I choose to act like that.
yeah.
Um, and so I hope it does shut up some of the haters. You truly never know what anyone is going through or what they have been through. Like,
Mhm.
I mean, it's crazy. You just never know. Even I think we all should be able to know that as we go through shit every day and we go to work or we go to these places, we go socialize and we put on like this mask or this cover and we're all struggling with something like truly like um and so I hope it just gives people a better perspective on that and I do it's something right now that I'm constantly thinking about of like when I'm done with competing in CrossFit, like what can I do? Like how can I do it? Like how can I best use like my life and my knowledge and experience to, help kids or, help adults, like whoever, like how can I do that? And I think what's really cool, randomly is my mom, right? Like she was an addict and now she's a family therapist, which is insane. Like she helps families who are
Wow.
struggling, right? Like kids and parents with these bad relationships, there's addiction, whatever it is in the families. And like she helps with that. And like she, from firsthand experience, can like talk about this and like help these families with it. So I'm like, how can I do something like that? I see myself as like a family therapist? Probably not. But it's like, at least hopefully this documentary also gives me, a little bit of credibility and I hope we can just find a way to do that in the future.